Noemi paced back and forth in the hospital corridor. She was overwhelmed with anxiety and couldn't calm down. At that very moment, her mother, Otha, was in the operating room, teetering on the edge between life and death. 2 years earlier, tragedy struck their family. At that time, 16-year-old Noemi had no idea what it meant to fight for someone else's life. Mother and daughter were getting ready for Noemi's school graduation. She was twirling in front of the mirror, checking herself out. "Mom, tell me, doesn't this gown look good on me?" she asked. "Yes, sweetie, it really does," Otha replied with a smile, recalling the time when she had worn something similar. Suddenly, a sharp pain pierced through Otha's chest. She gasped and turned pale. "Mom, what's wrong?" Noemi cried out, rushing to her side as Otha slowly slid down the wall to the floor. "It hurts," Otha whispered. Noemi was in a panic. She had no idea what to do. She knelt beside her mother, who was curled up in pain, tears streaming down her face. "Call an ambulance," Otha murmured softly. Noemi grabbed her phone and started dialing emergency services. Her hands were shaking, and her mind was foggy. Somehow, she managed to push through her emotions and call for help. "Mom, hang in there, they said they'd be here soon." The wait for the ambulance felt like an eternity. Noemi cried helplessly, realizing she couldn't do anything more to help her mother. 20 minutes later, the ambulance arrived, and it was decided to take Otha to the hospital after a preliminary diagnosis of a heart attack. "Call your father, dear," Otha said as the medics prepared to take her away. "Let him take you to his place while I'm in the hospital." "Mom, I can handle this on my own," Noemi sobbed. "You need to focus on getting better." When Otha was taken away, Noemi cried even harder. She couldn't believe that her young, 42-year-old mother could have heart problems. As it turned out, Otha's heart had been troubling her for a while, but she had chosen not to tell her daughter. After calming down a bit, Noemi found herself at a crossroads. She loved her father, but she didn't want to live with his wife and her children. Noemi knew that her father, Frederick, had once dated a girl named Prue when he was young. But Prue decided she didn't need a poor student in her life and married a businessman's son at 19. Frederick was heartbroken by Prue's betrayal and, to numb the pain, started dating Otha, who was deeply in love with him. He didn't have any special feelings for her, he simply allowed himself to be loved. And Otha was willing to do anything for the man she adored. They lived together for 7 years. Frederick occasionally had affairs, and Otha knew about them but chose to stay silent. She endured it just to be close to Frederick. Better this way than not at all. And when Otha got pregnant, Frederick, being an honorable man, married her. Otha was overjoyed. After all, what could be better than having a child with the one you love? To his own surprise, Frederick turned out to be a wonderful father. After coming home from work, he would take his daughter in his arms, carrying her around and talking to her. "Noemi, just imagine, when you grow up, we will travel together, explore new cities and countries, and learn about their cultures," he would say. Watching her husband, Otha smiled happily. Her dream of a harmonious family life had come true. When Noemi turned 1 year old, Otha sensed that her husband had another woman in his life. But this time, it wasn't just another fling, this was something much more serious. He hadn't started spending less time with their daughter, but he had practically stopped talking to his wife. Whenever Otha tried to engage him in conversation, Frederick would avoid eye contact and give vague, awkward answers. One day, Frederick came home and sat down on the hallway bench. Noemi was a year and a half old then. She walked up to her father and reached out her arms. Frederick absent-mindedly picked her up and placed her on his lap. "Papa," the little girl said. "Yes, my sweet one," he replied with a sad smile. Suddenly, he hugged his daughter tightly and held her close. Noemi cried out in pain, and Otha, who had been watching, quickly rushed over, grabbing her daughter and holding her close. "Frederick, what's going on with you?" she asked. "Otha, Frederick looked at his wife. "I'm leaving you." "Where?" Otha asked, stunned, though she already knew the answer. Her husband's new woman, or rather, his old love, Prue, was pregnant by him. Prue had come to their home that day to break the news to Otha. "Otha, my beloved Prue is back in my life. And she is expecting my child. What about Noemi and me?" Otha asked. She tried to stay strong and not cry, not wanting to frighten their daughter, who was already looking at them with a confused expression. "I'm not abandoning you," Frederick promised. "I'll continue to support you." "No. You will support your daughter." Otha decided firmly. "I will take care of myself." That very day, Frederick packed his things and left. To his credit, he remained a good father. Despite his new responsibilities, he spent a lot of time with Noemi. The girl knew that Prue had given birth to her half-sister, Casey, but she had no desire to meet or interact with her. She was angry at her father's new family because of what had happened to her mother, who, after the divorce, dedicated her life to her daughter, completely disregarding her own personal life. Noemi tried to talk to her mother about it, but Otha would always respond that she had loved once, and it hadn't led to anything good. So, Noemi decided to leave her mother be. A year ago, Otha's heart started acting up. At first, it was just a mild discomfort, but gradually the pain intensified. Tests revealed that she needed urgent surgery. "Mama, I'm going to call Dad and ask him for money for the surgery," Noemi said, reaching for her phone. "No. I'm not taking money from him." Otha was adamant. She had once promised herself never to depend on her ex-husband under any circumstances, and she intended to keep that promise. Instead, she borrowed the money from her brother. "Otha, you understand this is a large sum," Lanny said as he handed his sister the money. "Don't worry, I'll pay back every penny." "I'm not worried, I just want to protect myself," he replied, pulling out some papers from his bag. "This is a contract stating that if the debt is not repaid, your apartment will be transferred to me." "Lanny, do you understand what you're doing right now?" "Yes, I want to protect myself and my money. But if the surgery doesn't go well and you take the apartment, where will Noemi live?" Otha was shocked by her brother's actions. "Then my kids won't have money for their education," Lanny shrugged. "If you don't like my terms, take out a bank loan." Otha found herself in a difficult situation. She was determined not to take money from her ex-husband, and she also refused to take out a loan. If something went wrong, her daughter would be left with a huge debt. But after weighing all the pros and cons, she decided to accept her brother's terms. "Fine, I agree," Otha said, signing the contract. The day of the surgery finally arrived. Noemi was allowed into her mother's hospital room so they could talk. The doctors understood the gravity of the situation. This might be the last time mother and daughter would see each other. They spoke, trying to encourage each other and maintain a positive outlook, believing that everything would turn out fine. With that hope, Otha was taken into surgery. The surgery had already been going on for 5 hours. Noemi was extremely anxious and couldn't stay still. She paced back and forth, her eyes constantly fixed on the door to the operating room. Finally, the surgeon who had been operating on Otha came out. "Well?" Noemi immediately approached him. From his expression, she understood that her mother was gone. Noemi sat in her room, slumped in a chair with her hands on her head. How was she supposed to live without her beloved mother? A soft knock came on the door. "Noemi, may I come in?" Prue's quiet voice asked as she peeked into the room. Noemi simply nodded in response. Strangely enough, it was this woman, the one who had broken up their family, who was now the one offering Noemi support. When the doctor informed her that Otha was gone, Noemi immediately called her father. 20 minutes later, he arrived with his wife. Frederick held Noemi tightly while she was given a sedative. Sobbing, she sat down and leaned against the wall. She had no idea what to do next. "Noemi, I'm Prue, your father's wife," the woman introduced herself, gently taking Noemi's hand. "Would you like to go outside?" Noemi looked at her stepmother. Now she understood why her father had always loved this woman. She was extraordinarily beautiful. "No, I want to see my mom," Noemi whispered. "Sweetheart, why?" Frederick tried to persuade her. "Let your memory of your mother be of her alive, healthy, and smiling." "Dad, don't you understand?" "Frederick, try talking to the doctor," Prue suggested, placing her hand on her husband's shoulder. "Maybe he'll make an exception and let Noemi see her mother." "But why?" Frederick was puzzled. He worried this moment might leave an even deeper scar on his daughter's soul. Right now, when Noemi can be alone with her mother, she can say goodbye, Prue explained. At the funeral, there will be relatives, friends, and acquaintances, and she won't be able to say everything she wants. Understand? Yes, Frederick kissed his wife on the cheek. "You're right, as always." He stood up and went to find the doctor. Prue stayed close to Noemi the entire time, gently stroking her hand, understanding how much she was suffering. After 15 minutes, the doctor approached them. He looked at Noemi and asked, "Do you really want to do this? Are you sure you can handle it?" "Yes," Noemi whispered. "All right, someone needs to accompany her," the doctor said firmly. "Yes, my husband will be here shortly." He had to step out for a moment. "Something came up," the doctor replied. "Then I will go," Prue offered, though she didn't want to go in. She knew that if she refused, Noemi wouldn't be allowed in without an escort. "Will you really come with me?" Noemi asked. "Yes, dear, I will be with you every step of the way," Prue reassured her, gently hugging her stepdaughter. 10 minutes later, Noemi stood in front of her mother's body. She couldn't believe Otha was truly gone. It seemed as though she was merely sleeping and would open her eyes at any moment. "Mom," Noemi touched her mother's shoulder. "Mom, open your eyes, stop sleeping. You're just not awake from the anesthesia yet, right?" But there was only silence. Prue, watching this scene, pressed her hand to her mouth to stop herself from crying out. Her heart ached at the unfairness of it all. Otha was so young and beautiful, she didn't deserve to die. "Mom, why did you leave me?" Noemi whispered. She took her mother's hand. "Prue, Mom's hand is still warm. Feel it." At that moment, the doctor, who was accompanying Noemi, stepped forward, gently taking her by the shoulders and turning her to face him. "Noemi, your mother is gone. You need to understand that," he said firmly. "Yes, she's still warm, but that's only because it hasn't even been an hour since she passed." It was harsh, but it was the truth. And she would have to accept it. "Noemi, talk to your mom," Prue suggested. "You might not get another chance later." "You're right," Noemi said, trying to gather her composure. Noemi stepped closer to Otha again. She couldn't believe what was happening. "Mom, I'm so sorry I couldn't protect you. I wanted you to be here with me." "Noemi, sweetheart, your mom will always be with you as your guardian angel," Prue said softly, wrapping an arm around her. Noemi continued to look at her mother, repeatedly asking for forgiveness. She blamed herself for not being able to save Otha. "Noemi, this isn't your fault," Prue whispered, stroking her head. Then came the funeral, which Frederick organized. During those days, he and Prue stayed in Noemi's apartment. After the wake, Noemi went to her room. She wanted to be alone with her thoughts and figure out how to live from now on, without her mother. Prue knocked on the door and, after asking for permission, entered the room. "Noemi, we need to talk," she said quietly, sitting down beside the girl. "I'm listening." "The thing is, Frederick and I need to go back to our home," Prue said. "Casey, your sister, is waiting for us there." "I understand. I want you to come with us." "No," she cried out. Noemi simply couldn't bring herself to leave the apartment where she had lived with her mother. "Noemi, I understand you've lived here all your life," Prue started. But at that moment, the doorbell rang. Noemi heard her father let a guest in and talk with him. At first, the conversation was calm, but gradually the voices grew louder. "Lanny, do you hear yourself?" Frederick shouted. "You buried your sister today, and now you're here for your inheritance. Otha isn't coming back, and I need the money." "What money?" Frederick was stunned. "The thing is, my sister borrowed money for the surgery. The apartment was the collateral." "But how?" Frederick was shocked. "Why didn't Otha ask me for the money?" "You know her," Lanny scoffed. She was proud. "Lanny, I'll pay you back for the apartment, every penny." Frederick looked at the man with hope. "In a year, or at most 2. But please don't bother Noemi right now. She's already having a hard time." "Frederick, understand that I need the money urgently." Lanny stood his ground. "But you and Otha agreed that she'd pay you back when she could," Frederick said. "Please, give us a little more time." "No, I need the apartment now. Either give me the money now or the apartment." "But I don't have that kind of money right now," the man muttered. Suddenly, Prue stepped into the hallway, having overheard the entire conversation, and felt compelled to intervene. "Frederick, don't humiliate yourself," Prue said. "How much time do we have to vacate the apartment?" "Prue, where will Noemi live?" Frederick was perplexed by his wife's decision. "Where else?" the woman asked. "In our apartment. She'll share a room with Casey." "You know, you're right," Frederick thought for a moment. "Then, in a year or 2, we'll buy Noemi her own apartment." "That's great," Lanny said with satisfaction. "Will you have enough time to move out in 2 days?" 2 days later, Noemi crossed the threshold of her father's apartment, which was now her new home. Prue showed her to her room, which she would share with her stepsister Casey. Casey was less than thrilled about having someone new living in her room. "Mom, why do I have to share a room with her?" Casey asked indignantly. "Because she's your sister," Prue answered firmly. "She's not my sister," Casey exclaimed. "Casey, don't say that. You both have the same father. This decision is final. Please, show Noemi where she can put her things," Prue said before leaving the room. Noemi felt out of place. She could see clearly that she wasn't welcome here, but she had no choice but to endure her sister's displeasure. "Casey, I'm sorry it turned out this way," Noemi said. "Why do I need your apologies?" Casey sneered. "The sooner you leave, the better for you." Noemi unpacked her belongings onto the shelves in the closet that Casey had allowed her to use. She was struggling to manage her emotions. She desperately wanted to hug her mom, but she was trying to hold herself together. Noemi had to come to terms with the fact that she was now alone in the world, with no one to comfort her. Of course, there were her father and Prue. But it felt as though Frederick was essentially a stranger to her. Yes, he had been actively involved in her upbringing, but what could he really do in this situation? "Can you leave the room?" Casey asked, with a dismissive tone, glaring at Noemi. "Why?" Noemi was puzzled. "I need to change," the younger sister huffed. "And I don't want you watching me." "Oh, how I wanted to," Noemi murmured as she left the room. As Prue walked towards the kitchen, she saw Noemi standing by the door to the room. "What are you doing here?" Prue asked in surprise. "Casey is changing," Noemi explained. "I see," Prue said with a smile. "Let's go have some tea." "All right." At that moment, Casey came out of the room. Seeing her sister, Noemi was furious. "Why are you wearing my sweater?" Noemi was shocked by Casey's behavior. "What's in my room is mine," Casey said with a brazen tone. "Got it?" "No. This isn't acceptable," Prue said angrily. She looked at her daughter with a stern expression. "Young lady, take off that sweater immediately and do not take other people's things without permission. Do you understand?" "Got it," Casey mumbled, giving Noemi a scowl. She went back into the room, dramatically took off the sweater, and threw it onto Noemi's shelf in the closet. Casey. Put the sweater back where it was, Prue said sternly, looking at her daughter. The girl retrieved the sweater, folded it neatly, and glanced at her mother. Are you satisfied? Casey asked with irritation, looking at her older sister. Noemi remained silent. She didn't want to argue with her sister but also had no desire to tolerate her rudeness. All right, girls, let's talk, Prue said, sitting down on the couch. Since it turns out that you'll be sharing this room, Casey will have to accept it. But why? Casey huffed. I was living peacefully, minding my own business, and suddenly this. Not this, but your sister, Prue corrected her. Mom, you're just feeling guilty about this orphan, Casey snapped. It's not my fault you decided to take her poor mother's husband away. Casey. At that moment, Frederick entered the room. The younger daughter had never seen him so angry and fell silent in fear. What do you think you're doing? Dad, I just don't understand why your daughter has to live with us, she said. I have my own routine, and it's hard for me to adjust to someone else. Understand, these are temporary inconveniences, Frederick said, hugging his daughter. For now, Noemi will stay with you, and later we'll buy her an apartment. Her. Casey shouted. Why her? Casey, her father said sternly. What, Casey? The girl retorted. If you like her so much, you can live with her, and I'll take on the burden of loneliness in a new apartment. I'm not to blame that you left her mom and married mine. Casey. Stop. Suddenly, Frederick clutched his chest in pain. Call an ambulance. Quickly. Noemi shouted as she rushed to her father. An hour later, after the paramedics had left, Frederick lay in his bedroom. Prue was taking care of him. The doctors said it was a pre-heart attack condition. After relieving the pain, they left because Frederick refused to go to the hospital. What kind of person are you? Casey hissed at Noemi. Wherever you go, people end up with heart problems. What are you talking about? Noemi was shocked by her younger sister's statement. Your mother is gone, Casey sneered. We don't know why she had a weak heart. Maybe you caused so much trouble that she couldn't handle it. Unexpectedly, Noemi slapped her sister across the face. Don't you dare say bad things about my mother. Do you understand? You'll regret doing that, Casey said, pressing her hand to her cheek. You'll pay for this. Casey stormed out of the room, leaving Noemi alone. She felt deeply ashamed of her behavior. She had never hit anyone before in her life. Prue entered the room and saw Noemi's dejected state. Noemi, I'm sorry things turned out this way, Prue said, sitting down next to the girl. Casey has always been pampered and spoiled. My boys adored their little princess. Boys? Yes, I have 2 sons from my first marriage, Tyler and Ryan. My oldest son, Tyler, works with Frederick in the family business after graduating from university. And the middle one, Ryan, is still studying. Do they live here too? Noemi asked, frightened. Was it going to be so cramped in this house? We bought an apartment for Tyler 6 months ago, so he lives separately, Prue explained. But Ryan lives with us. I see, Noemi said with relief. Suddenly, she flinched at the unexpected sound of a voice. Hi, Mom, a handsome young man peeked into the room. Prue approached her son and kissed him. Ryan, this is Noemi, she introduced. Frederick's daughter from his first marriage. Nice to meet you, the young man said, gazing intently at Noemi and smiling. Noemi involuntarily shuddered at the smile, which resembled a predator's grin. She realized that he was interested in her, and she found it very unsettling. And what is this lovely girl doing in our house? Noemi will be staying with us for a while, Prue answered. How delightful. At that moment, another young man walked into the apartment. Seeing him, Noemi was rendered speechless. The tall, handsome brunette with brown eyes captivated her heart from the very first second. The young man looked around, puzzled. "I'm afraid to ask, but what's going on here?" the brunette inquired. "Noemi, this is my eldest son, Tyler," Prue introduced. "And this is Frederick's daughter, Noemi," Ryan added, putting his arm around the girl's waist, but she removed his hand, wanting to set boundaries with him immediately. "Nice to meet you," Tyler smiled at Noemi. Then he turned to Prue. "Mom, where's Frederick?" "Oh, so much has happened today." As Prue explained the situation, Tyler gazed thoughtfully out the window, considering how to help Noemi. Meanwhile, Ryan was formulating a plan to use the situation to his advantage. He was very taken with Noemi. Tyler understood that his sister Casey had taken an immediate dislike to Noemi. He knew his sister's character well. When Casey was angry with someone, it was clear that the person would have a hard time. Therefore, Noemi was going to have a very difficult time living there. "Mom, I see only one solution," Ryan said, looking at Noemi with desire. "What solution?" Prue asked cautiously. "We need to find an apartment for Noemi," Ryan replied. In reality, Ryan had his own agenda. If Noemi stayed there, it would be hard for him to seduce her, as Prue had taken her under her wing. The farther Noemi was from her mother, the better. "No, Frederick said his daughter will live here," Prue said firmly. "Mom, maybe Ryan could temporarily stay with me?" Tyler suggested. "I don't know," Prue hesitated. The problem with Ryan was significant. As a university student, he had no interest in studying. He was more drawn to entertainment and parties. As a result, Ryan's academic performance had deteriorated, and he managed to stay enrolled only because Frederick had made substantial financial contributions to the university. Therefore, it was crucial that Ryan did not live away from his parents, otherwise, he would likely revert to his old habits and neglect his studies again. When the truth about Ryan's attitude towards his studies came to light, it caused a huge scandal within Prue's family. "What do you mean Ryan is being expelled from university?" Frederick was stunned to learn about his stepson's situation. "He's only been to lectures a few days this semester," Prue cried. "Ryan, what's going on?" Frederick gave him a stern look. "I don't like the university or the future profession," Ryan tried to justify himself. "When you decided to enroll there, we discussed all the details of this education." Frederick was very strict. "Do you remember my conditions?" "Yeah." The young man yawned, still half asleep from another party. "That I have to finish this university. And if you have problems with your studies or don't want to continue, what are you supposed to do?" Frederick pressed on. "I'm supposed to return all the money you and Mom spent on my education within 3 months. "Well then, dear Ryan, the choice is yours," Frederick looked at him. "Either you settle all your academic debts and continue studying, or you get a job and pay us back the money spent on your education," Frederick shrugged. "Mom." Ryan looked at Prue, confused. "Where am I going to find a high-paying job now?" He knew that a significant amount of money had been spent on his education, and he couldn't repay it within 3 months. "Ryan, the choice is yours," Prue's voice trembled. She felt sorry for her son but couldn't go against the agreement. "I'll finish this damn university," Ryan said angrily. At first, he threw himself into his studies to clear his debts. Once he was back on track academically, Prue noticed that her son had resumed his old habits of going to clubs and parties. Prue was deeply embarrassed before Frederick about her son. Frederick had never favored his daughter, holding her up as an example to his sons. He had never reproached her for leaving him in her youth, chasing money and status. At 19, Prue had felt it was unimportant that she didn't love her husband Hank. She simply liked him. Initially, they lived a carefree and happy life. Her father-in-law fully supported their family financially. Prue and Hank were avid partygoers, spending their days partying and not working. This continued until Prue became pregnant with their first child. She started taking care of herself and stayed at home, while her husband continued his old habits. He still disappeared at night, and later it was discovered, with unknown people. Tyler was born a calm child. Surprisingly, Prue turned out to be a good mother. She spent all her time with her son, while Hank had no interest in parenting. This led to conflicts in their family. "Hank, I'm alone with Tyler all day," Prue cried. "I want to go to the beauty salon and the gym." "Go ahead," the man scoffed. "Who's stopping you? Who will I leave our son with? You're the mother, so you handle it." Hank's father, upon learning about his behavior, set a condition: if Hank did not start helping his wife, he would cut off his financial support. Hank decided to temporarily become a model husband and father. Sometimes he even enjoyed being Tyler's father. When Prue told him she was pregnant with their second child, Hank was over the moon. "I won't miss anything with this baby," a delighted Hank said. But Ryan was the complete opposite of his brother. He cried and screamed all day long. His parents constantly carried him around just to enjoy a bit of silence. "Why is he always screaming?" Hank complained. "How should I know?" Prue shrugged. "The doctors said he's fine. Calm him down, you're the mother." Gradually, Hank grew tired of being a caring father and returned to his old habits of partying and entertaining. Prue was exhausted. The constantly crying Ryan drove her to the brink of hysteria. She couldn't afford to lose her mind because of Tyler. At 3 years old, Tyler was remarkably perceptive and smart for his age. He tried not to disturb his mother, giving her a chance to rest after sleepless nights, for which Prue was grateful. Hank became indifferent to his wife and children. No matter how hard Prue tried to engage him, things only got worse. Over time, they became like strangers living together in the same apartment. 2 years later, Hank died of a drug overdose. Hank's father, blaming Prue for her husband's death, kicked her and the children out of the apartment. He promised her that if she claimed Hank's inheritance, he would take the children away from her. Prue realized she would have to fend for herself. That was when she met Frederick, who became her guardian angel, taking her under his wing. It was a pity that, for her and her children, the man had to forsake his own daughter. Prue always felt guilty towards Noemi. Now it was time for her to pay the price. "How I love having everyone together," Frederick said as he entered the kitchen. His voice was still weak after the attack. "Where's Casey?" "She's at a friend's," Prue replied. She helped her husband sit in a chair. "My dream has come true," Frederick smiled. "All my children around one table." Prue tried to look happy, but she felt a deep sadness. She knew that Noemi's presence in the house would complicate their lives significantly. "I have a suggestion," Tyler suddenly said. "Since Casey is opposed to sharing her room, maybe Noemi could move in with me." Those at the table exchanged glances. Some understood that this might be the only solution to the situation. "Tyler, wait," Prue looked at her son carefully. "What will Janet say?" Tyler had been living with his girlfriend Janet for 6 months. He had thought about proposing to her, but something held him back. There was one trait in Janet that he didn't like. "She won't mind," Tyler said confidently. Although he was being deceitful. They hadn't been living together for 3 days already. The girl was pathologically jealous and extremely possessive, which led to their breakup. They often fought due to her personality. She hated it when Tyler interacted with the opposite sex. And if he smiled at another girl, it was as if the world had ended. Janet didn't care where they were, at home, in a cafe, or at the cinema. If she decided to voice her displeasure, nothing and no one could stop her. As soon as she noticed Tyler looking at another girl, or even talking to her, Janet would be overwhelmed by jealousy. She would start yelling and having a tantrum. Tyler tried to explain that he loved only Janet and needed no one else, but it was all in vain. They had broken up a couple of times already. But love kept bringing them back together. After another argument, Tyler decided that their reconciliation would be the last. He was tired of her behavior. "Tyler, I love you so much, Janet whispered, hugging him. Sweetheart, I need to tell you something. Tyler looked into her eyes. Understand, I love only you, and I need no one else. I do too. Janet wanted to kiss him, but Tyler wouldn't let her. I'm not finished, he said sternly. If you can't trust me, then there's no talk of a future together. Do you understand? Not completely. We live in a society with many other women, Tyler began to explain. Due to my work, I have to interact with them. If you keep having tantrums over nothing, no one will want to deal with our company, and Frederick and I will go bankrupt. And I have a better idea, Janet said with a smile. How about I work at your company? That way, we'll be together all the time. Janet, don't you trust me? I trust you, the girl huffed. I don't trust the women who work with you. Janet, I've told you everything. Tyler said firmly. He hoped Janet heard him. At first, Janet managed to keep herself in check, although it was clear that she was unhappy with the conditions he set. Janet increasingly started showing up at Tyler's work, demonstratively hugging and kissing him. One day, Janet arrived at the office again. She saw Tyler explaining the features of a laptop to an unfamiliar woman. Janet thought the woman was too talkative and was flirting with Tyler. Unable to tolerate it, Janet approached him and kissed him. Excuse me, but don't you think you're not on a date? The stranger reacted sharply. Am I not allowed to kiss my fiancé? Janet countered, giving the woman an innocent look. You are, but not at the workplace, the stranger sniffed. I think I'll leave. Tyler was shocked by his girlfriend's behavior. Now, their company was losing clients. Something had to be done, so he said. Miss, please accept our apologies. Tyler was angry with Janet. As compensation, I'd like to offer you a discount on the laptop. Okay, I accept, the stranger continued looking at the laptop. After the customer left, Tyler could no longer contain his fury. Janet, what are you doing? He asked, after taking her to a back room. What did I do wrong? Janet asked, surprised. Because of you, I had to offer a discount to keep the customer. Tyler raised his voice. But she was flirting with you. Didn't I warn you? Tyler said sternly. If I hadn't come, she would have. Didn't I warn you? Tyler interrupted. Yes. We need to live apart for a while and take a break from our relationship, he said in a stern tone. He loved Janet, but he realized that she would never change. Living with a jealous, possessive person was something he didn't want to continue. Prue liked Janet and hoped she would become her daughter-in-law. Therefore, Tyler decided to keep the matter from his mother for now to avoid upsetting her. Frederick sat, thoughtfully watching his daughter. He could see that Noemi was ready to leave the house. She knew she was causing problems for others and was willing to do anything to escape. Suddenly, the front door opened and someone walked in. Is she still here? Casey entered the kitchen. She looked at Noemi with hatred as Noemi huddled in the corner. Noemi quickly stood up, ready to leave the apartment. She was prepared to stay anywhere but under the same roof as Casey and her brother Ryan. Listen up. Frederick slammed his hand on the table. He got up from his seat and looked at Casey. Sit down. He motioned to the empty spot next to Ryan. Frederick, you shouldn't get worked up, Prue said worriedly. Everyone listen to me. The man said. So, my dear children, you're used to being three in the family, and I've treated you like my own. I've never reproached you or refused to help. It turns out that I have a daughter from my first marriage, Noemi. She needs my support and help right now. And instead of supporting her, you've been tormenting and bullying her. She's nobody to me. Casey shouted. She's your sister. Frederick slammed his hand on the table. You grew up without knowing hardships. I hardly ever saw Noemi. She's had the least luck in life. I'm not responsible, Casey snorted. And I'm not going to live in the same room with her. Is that clear? Clear, the man said firmly. If that's the case, the money we saved for your preparatory courses and the class trip will go towards renting an apartment for Noemi. What? Casey was so furious she nearly choked. She turned red from lack of breath. You heard, Frederick sat back down at the table. Dad, please don't. Noemi was uncomfortable that others were suffering because of her problems. I can stay with a friend for a while. I'll figure something out from there. Roaming from one friend's apartment to another with a living father? The man was taken aback. No, dear daughter, that won't happen. Dad, but... I've said all. Frederick, what about my suggestion? Tyler asked quietly. I have a 2-bedroom apartment. I'll stay in one room, and Noemi can stay in the other. Besides, I'm at work all day, so I won't be in the way. Casey looked at her brother in surprise. Tyler, can I come with you? Why? I want to see how you're Janet. Casey gave Noemi a disdainful look. Throws her out of the apartment. Enough. I've had it. Frederick exploded. He quickly got up from the table and went to his room. Frederick, where are you going? Prue followed her husband. Tyler looked at Noemi, who sat there in shock from the unfolding events. Life with her mother had been entirely different from the one her father had in his new family. She remembered how, during her teenage years, when she used to argue with Otha, she had dreamed of living with her father. God, how naive she had been. Noemi, what do you think? Tyler asked. Will you come with me? Yes, Noemi whispered. She realized that this was probably the best option for her right now. While Noemi packed her things, Frederick paced back and forth in his room, unable to find peace. He was red with anger and frustration, which consumed him. Frederick, calm down. Prue approached her husband and tried to hug him to calm him down. You shouldn't get worked up. How can I calm down? He looked at his wife with a bewildered expression, when I've raised a monster. Casey is still a teenager, and in her world, everything is either good or bad, Prue tried to explain. There are no shades of gray for her right now. It's either black or white. Prue, do you hear yourself? Frederick was astonished. That doesn't justify her behavior. He stood in the middle of the room, looking at his wife. Prue, I want you to understand me. Frederick approached her and placed his hands on her shoulders. I don't intend to separate the kids into yours and mine. To me, they are all the same. I understand that. She sighed heavily, sensing his despair but not knowing how to help. But I don't know what to do. Well, I do, he said firmly. I am really going to buy Noemi an apartment. But with what money? Prue was taken aback. Would Frederick go through with his threat, putting Casey's future at risk? I made my decision 10 minutes ago. Frederick raised his voice. Why would you think I've changed my mind? No, but, she paused, thinking quickly. On one hand, there was Casey, on the other, her husband and his daughter, and their future. If she sided with Frederick now, Casey might never forgive her. But if she sided with Casey, it could distance her from her husband, potentially leading to the family falling apart. Frederick, maybe we could ask Tyler to move in with us temporarily while we save money for Noemi's apartment, she suggested hopefully. This seemed like the only reasonable solution to her. Are you kidding? Frederick asked. We gave our son an apartment, and now you suggest taking it back. I'm trying to make sure we don't all end up at each other's throats. Prue was almost in tears from frustration. I don't intend to argue, Frederick was resolute. You're worried because your daughter might suffer. But Noemi means nothing to you. It's not my fault you never brought your daughter here, Prue snapped. Even though I asked you several times. If you'd listened to me then, none of this would be happening now. The girls would know each other and would have accepted having to share a room more calmly. You're right, Frederick admitted thoughtfully. But what's done is done. We need to solve this problem now. Fine, let's see how Tyler and Noemi manage living together for a while, Prue suggested. Maybe they'll become friends, and they might be okay with the temporary arrangement. Alright, Frederick answered doubtfully. She approached and hugged him, understanding his feelings. Yes, he hadn't spent much time with his eldest daughter, but she was still his child, and he wanted to provide for her as much as he did for Prue's children. However, Casey was her daughter, and Prue felt more sympathy for her. The girl had been dreaming of that class trip for so long, and if she were deprived of it, it would be bad for everyone. Most importantly, it would forever push Noemi and Casey apart. So now she needed to convince Frederick to let his daughter stay with Tyler. At that moment, Noemi, having packed her things, left Casey's room. After she left, Casey demonstratively locked the door. "Noemi, just ignore her," Tyler said calmly, feeling sorry for the girl. He could see that Noemi was holding herself together with the last of her strength. First, she lost her mother, then her uncle kicked her out of his apartment, and now her half-sister caused a scene over her coming to stay. Right now, she felt empty and alone. Tyler understood these feelings well. Since childhood, he often had to be on his own. When Ryan was born, all of their parents' attention went to him. His mom would be exhausted from putting his brother to sleep, so Tyler tried to be quiet to avoid waking Ryan. Tyler was glad when Frederick joined their family because he was the only one who, despite his own busy life and exhaustion, always showed genuine interest in him. No, his mother loved him too, but she was constantly busy, first with Ryan, then with Casey. Thanks to his stepfather, Tyler didn't grow up deprived of love, and he was immensely grateful to Frederick for that. So now, when his stepfather needed help, Tyler couldn't leave him to deal with the situation alone. "Tyler, can I ask you a question?" Noemi asked timidly. "Of course, you can," he smiled. "Tell me, am I really not going to be a bother to you?" she asked. "Just be honest, please." "No, Noemi, you won't be a bother," Tyler winked at her. "Well, unless you snore really loudly." "I don't," she said with a small smile. "I promise." They arrived at Tyler's apartment. Tyler helped Noemi carry her things inside. "Well, make yourself at home," he said as he walked into the living room. "Sorry that I had to put you in the living room. My bedroom is full of my stuff, including my computer, which I need for work." "There's absolutely nothing to apologize for," Noemi smiled. "I completely understand. I'm the one who should feel embarrassed that you had to take me in. Any decent guy would do the same in my place," Tyler replied. "By the way, I'm starving. How about we cook dinner?" At that moment, the front door burst open, and Janet stormed into the living room. She was clearly furious. "So it's true?" she shouted from the doorway. "You brought a girl into our apartment?" "Janet! Calm down," Tyler snapped. "Now I get it," Janet continued, her voice rising. "You kicked me out on purpose just so you could bring this." "Janet!" "What, Janet?" she fumed with jealousy. "When Casey called me and told me that some poor relative of her father's would be staying with you." "Enough," Tyler ordered. His tone sent a shiver down Noemi's spine. His eyes were filled with a mix of anger, frustration, and despair. "Not another word. How dare you try to shut me up?" Janet continued. She tried to move toward Noemi, but Tyler blocked her path. "Get out of my way." "No. Janet, don't do anything stupid. Why are you defending her?" Janet asked, narrowing her eyes. "I don't know what Casey told you," Tyler said sternly, "but this girl is Frederick's daughter, and she's having some trouble with housing right now. And, of course, you offered for her to stay with you," Janet sneered. "And where will this poor thing sleep? Here, or have you prepared a spot for her in your bed? That's it. I've had enough." Tyler grabbed Janet by the arm and led her to the door. "Hand over the keys to the apartment," he demanded, stopping by the door with his hand outstretched. "What?" Janet was stunned. "Now." "Fine. Take them." She threw the keys at Tyler's feet. Before leaving the apartment, she turned around and shouted. "And you, poor thing, better be careful," she screamed, consumed by anger and jealousy. "You'll regret stealing Tyler from me. Get out." Tyler's nerves were fraying. He quickly shut the door behind Janet to stop himself from saying more hurtful things to her. As he entered the room and saw Noemi, Tyler's heart filled with pity for her. She was sitting on the floor, silently crying. Without thinking, Tyler quickly walked over, knelt in front of her, and pulled her into a tight embrace. Noemi sat on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. She couldn't understand how her life had turned upside down so quickly. Just a week ago, she still had her mother. And now? At that moment, Tyler held her even tighter. "Shoo, don't cry," he said gently. "Everything will be okay for us. One day, we'll look back and laugh at this situation." Through her tears, Noemi looked at him hopefully. "Do you really think so?" she sniffled. "Absolutely," Tyler smiled and stood up, helping her to her feet. Noemi felt a kindred spirit in him, and it made her feel much calmer. She still felt guilty about the conflicts happening in her father's family. But on the other hand, it wasn't her fault that Casey had grown up to be selfish. "Hey, how about we go to a cafe?" Tyler suggested suddenly. "A change of scenery might help." "I'm not sure," Noemi hesitated. She was used to paying her own way, and right now, she had no extra money at all. "Noemi, I'm inviting you," he smiled. "I'm just really hungry, and I don't feel like cooking." "All right," Noemi agreed. Half an hour later, they were sitting in a cafe near Tyler's place. He often ate there to avoid unnecessary arguments with Janet. Recently, their relationship had hit a dead end, and Tyler tried to spend as little time at home as possible. After placing their order, Tyler tried to engage the quiet Noemi in conversation. He knew she was under a lot of stress. To lighten the mood, he started sharing funny stories from his life. "When I first went to the beach, I was 5 years old," Tyler smiled. "I jumped right into the water. A wave hit me, and as I was spluttering, I yelled across the beach, 'Who salted the sea?' We never got to go to the sea," Noemi whispered. Her throat tightened, and unable to hold back her emotions, she began to cry. "Shoo, it's okay," Tyler said softly, stroking her hand. "We'll still get to see the sea together." "You don't understand," Noemi said quietly. "My mom never saw the sea. You have no idea how much she dreamed of it. At first, we didn't have the money, and then, she got sick." "Why didn't you ask your father for money?" Tyler asked, surprised. "Your father is well off, and he's not stingy. I don't think he would have refused to pay for a trip for you and your mom." "My mom was too proud to ask her ex-husband for money," Noemi shrugged. "She even borrowed money for her surgery from her brother, using our apartment as collateral." "Your uncle is a total jerk," Tyler remarked. "Let God judge him," Noemi waved it off. "Tyler, are there any job openings at your company?" "Job openings?" Tyler asked, puzzled. "I want to find a job," she explained. "Wait, I thought you got into university." Tyler clarified. "Yes, but while it's summer, I'd like to work a little." "To be honest, I'm not sure," he pondered. In reality, things were tough at their company right now, and he and Frederick were trying to optimize the staff where possible. "Well, I'll look for jobs at other companies tomorrow," Noemi said. "Shall we head home? I'm exhausted and really want to sleep." "Let's go," Tyler smiled. He liked this girl. They walked home in silence, each lost in their thoughts. Noemi knew she would have to juggle both studying and working, as she needed to pay for rent and support herself. She couldn't rely on Tyler's kindness forever. Tyler, meanwhile, was thinking about how he could help Noemi. He decided he would call some friends to see if anyone needed an assistant at their company. As they approached the entrance to Tyler's building, they saw Casey waiting for him. The moment she spotted Noemi, she marched over quickly. "Are you happy now?" Casey demanded as she reached Noemi. "What are you talking about?" Noemi asked, confused. "You got exactly what you wanted." Casey shouted. "Be more specific." Noemi demanded. "You made sure Dad left us and took all the money," Casey sneered bitterly. "Where did Dad go?" Noemi asked, stunned. "What money?" Tyler glanced first at Casey and then at Noemi. "What do you mean, what money?" Casey grew anxious. "The money that our parents saved for my tuition and my class trip." "But that's a considerable amount," Tyler frowned. "If Dad decided to do something like that, something serious must have happened." "What exactly happened?" "This happened." Casey nodded toward Noemi. "I asked, what happened?" Tyler repeated in a firm tone. And Casey confessed. "I overheard Dad saying he wanted to use my money to buy Noemi an apartment." Casey was practically shaking with anger. "I had to save my future, so I took the card where my money was kept." "You stole it?" Tyler clarified. "I took what rightfully belongs to me." Casey stomped her foot. Yes, she had stolen the card with the money, and of course, it didn't take long for her parents to find out. Frederick was furious about his daughter's actions, he just couldn't wrap his head around it. Meanwhile, Prue came to Casey's defense, arguing that she was just a teenager acting impulsively under the weight of her emotions. But Frederick wasn't convinced by his wife's words. He couldn't believe she was siding with Casey, even though Casey was clearly in the wrong. Unable to tolerate such a stance, Frederick decided he couldn't stay in the house any longer and left. "No, little sister, you're wrong," Tyler said with a bitter smile. "That money belongs to Frederick, because he's the only one in our family who works and provides for our future." "Yes, because we are his family, unlike this," Casey insisted, trying hard to distance the elder daughter from their father. "You're wrong." Tyler objected. "Noemi is his daughter too. She's been living somewhere else all her life, so she should keep living far away from us," Casey scoffed. "And why should I live far away from my father?" Noemi asked. She was tired of staying silent while being insulted. "I've lived with my mom since I was 1.5 because Prue came into my dad's life. Your mother left my father because she wanted a luxurious life. When she was thrown out of that comfortable, wealthy life, she remembered Frederick, who once loved her. She didn't hesitate to take him away from his family. She wasn't bothered by the fact that he had a wife and a small child. But Prue didn't mind burdening my father with her children. Then you were born, and there was no time left for me. Of course, Frederick became a father to many children, giving you all his love, tenderness, and care. On the rare occasions when Dad visited me, I was just happy to have him close. I never wanted money or expensive gifts from him, nothing. I just wanted him to be there. Now that my mom is gone, I'm incredibly happy that my father is back in my life." As Noemi finished her impassioned speech, she realized tears were streaming down her cheeks, and Tyler was holding her hand tightly. "Oh, I might just cry," Casey said sarcastically. "Somebody feel sorry for the poor orphan." "Sweetheart, forgive me." Turning around, Noemi saw Frederick standing behind her. "I feel so guilty towards you," he said. "Dad, why don't you get on your knees and beg for her forgiveness while you're at it?" Casey remarked sarcastically. She was furious that everyone seemed to pity Noemi. "Casey." Tyler reprimanded his sister, but she pretended not to hear him. "Frederick, what are you doing here?" Tyler asked. "Son, can I stay with you?" Frederick asked. He knew that if Tyler said no, he would have nowhere to go. Tyler looked at them, puzzled. What on earth had happened? And why had Noemi's arrival caused such a stir in their family? "Frederick, you didn't even need to ask," Tyler said as he approached his stepfather and hugged him. "You know this apartment is always at your disposal. You still have the keys, don't you? How could I come without asking?" Frederick was surprised. This is your home. What if Janet is against it? Well, first of all, this place is only mine on paper, my home is your home. And secondly, Janet and I broke up for good after her stunt today. What did she do? Frederick asked, astonished. Someone blabbed about Noemi moving into this apartment, Tyler said, shooting an angry glance at his sister, who was acting as if it had nothing to do with her. And added her own fabrications to it. I told Janet that if she didn't want to lose her beloved, she should hurry up, Casey said. Otherwise, some gold digger might snatch up our dear Tyler. Noemi has been very respectful, Tyler defended Noemi. She hasn't crossed any boundaries. We're just victims of circumstance, Noemi said, looking Casey straight in the eyes. My situation has led me to temporarily live with Tyler. And I have no intention of marrying him. In case you haven't realized, starting a family should be with someone you love, so you don't regret years wasted later. Who are you hinting at? Casey asked, squinting her eyes. I'm not hinting at anyone in particular, Noemi smiled. But if you drew a parallel with your mom, it only further proves my point. By the way, Frederick, does mom know about Casey's antics? Tyler had long understood what his younger siblings were like, so he decided to side with his stepfather and Noemi. Prue tried to justify her actions, Frederick said in disappointment. She said Casey is still young and foolish, acting out of emotion. I'm foolish. Casey protested. You're the ones who are, she trailed off, unable to find the right words. Noemi, forgive me, Frederick approached his eldest daughter and took her hands. I avoided meeting you because I was ashamed. For what? Casey was annoyed. She didn't like that the father who had always adored her suddenly remembered his older daughter. To her, it only meant one thing, her complete control over him was over. For abandoning Noemi, Frederick sighed deeply. When I left my family and went to Prue, I thought it would be better that way. You know, during our rare meetings, I was the happiest, Noemi admitted. But Mom was angry at you, not just for betraying her, but for abandoning me too. I tried to support you financially, Frederick tried to defend himself. And for that, we are truly grateful, Noemi said sincerely. Mom used the money to pay for my classes. What classes? Tyler asked, curious. I did figure skating for almost 10 years, Noemi smiled. And that's not a cheap hobby, professional skates, costumes, competitions. Why did you quit? He asked. For many reasons, Noemi waved her hand. First, I had a knee injury, then surgery, followed by a long rehabilitation. And then Mom got sick, and I just couldn't focus on figure skating anymore. Hey, why are we all standing outside? Tyler suggested. Let's go home and have some tea. Good idea, Frederick smiled. Are you coming? Noemi decided to give her younger sister one more chance. As if. Casey scoffed. In truth, she desperately wanted to go to her older brother's home. She loved her brother and enjoyed his care, but now, Casey was simply jealous of Noemi. Tyler, take me home. I'll call a taxi for you, he said, pulling out his phone and booking a car for her. So, you're not driving me? Casey asked, hurt. It's late, and I have to get up early for work. Tyler put his arm around his sister, but she shook it off, crossing her arms over her chest. And who was it that said you were all grown up? He teased, giving her nose a gentle flick. Leave me alone, Casey was on the verge of tears. Noemi was nothing but trouble. Couldn't her family see that? When the car arrived, Casey got in without saying goodbye to anyone. Frederick and Tyler exchanged glances and shrugged. A week passed. Frederick and Noemi were still staying at Tyler's place. Prue had tried several times to convince her husband to come back home, but he didn't fall for her pleas. He understood that until his wife reassessed her approach to raising their daughter, nothing would change. For the first time in a long while, coming back to Tyler's apartment in the evenings, Frederick felt like himself again, not just an ATM. Meanwhile, Noemi, who had been unsuccessfully looking for a job all this time, tried to be helpful by cleaning and preparing dinner for the men when they returned. "Noemi, your rabbit stew is perfect," Tyler said. "Thank you," she replied, blushing at the compliment. Frederick smiled. He had long noticed how Tyler and Noemi had begun to bond. Tyler made an effort to help Noemi whenever he could and often praised her, while Noemi would respond with a shy smile and a blush. Frederick hoped that genuine feelings were growing between them. After all, Tyler was a very good young man, and he would be an ideal husband for his Noemi. "By the way, Noemi, remind me, what major did you choose?" Tyler asked. "I already told you," she replied with a smile. "The Faculty of Physical Education and Sports." He gave her a mysterious look. "And what do you plan to become?" "A coach and instructor." "Tell me, would you like to get some practical experience?" Tyler asked. "What do you mean?" Noemi asked, surprised. "Well, I have a friend who works at the Ice Palace, and they urgently need a figure skating coach for kids aged 4 to 5. "Is that true?" Frederick exclaimed, excited. "Noemi, this is a great opportunity to prove yourself." Wow. This is so unexpected," Noemi exhaled. "Sweetheart, you should take this chance," Frederick encouraged her. 2 weeks later, Noemi was back on the ice. August arrived, and Noemi was thoroughly enjoying her work as a coach instructor at the Ice Palace. She took her job seriously and genuinely loved each child in her group. The children, in turn, adored her. "Listen, your Noemi is a real gem," Tyler's friend Anthony praised her when he came to pick her up. "I know," Tyler smiled. "Noemi is so attentive with her students, she listens to each of them, explains things patiently, and helps them out," Anthony added. "That's wonderful," Tyler said. "Yeah. And you know what's most interesting?" Anthony continued, looking at Tyler. "Since she joined us, the number of kids wanting to sign up for classes has increased. Everyone wants to be in Noemi's group. Can you believe that? She must be a real pro," Tyler whistled. "Yesterday, one of the moms threw a fit," Anthony said. "She came to enroll her daughter in figure skating. Our director offered her other instructors, but no, this lady started shouting that if her daughter wasn't signed up with Noemi, they wouldn't be coming here at all." "She really said that?" Tyler asked in surprise. "Word for word," Anthony confirmed. "Naturally, our other instructors are fuming and giving Noemi the side eye." "Ah, you know who's stirring them up," Tyler sighed. The thing was, among the other instructors was Janet's sister, Margot. From the moment Noemi stepped into the Ice Palace, half the staff had already been biased against her, all thanks to Margot. But Noemi paid no attention to this and fully dedicated herself to the children. As Noemi got to know the staff better, they began to realize that all of Margot's accusations were merely out of spite and anger over her sister. Many of them started to interact with Noemi in a friendly manner. "By the way, Tyler, I wanted to ask you something," Anthony said. "Go ahead. Is it serious between you and Noemi?" "Well, you see." Tyler hesitated. "I don't even know myself. I can only speak for myself." "What do you mean?" "The more I get to know Noemi, the more I fall for her," Tyler admitted. "She's wonderful, kind, and caring." "I get it," Anthony interrupted. "If we don't stop you, you could go on for hours." "That's true," Tyler smiled. "You could talk about a girl like that for hours." "And what about Janet?" "You know, over the past 2 months, I haven't thought about her once," Tyler frowned. "See, buddy, how it happens. You date someone, love them, and then realize they're not the right person for you, so you move on. Such is life," Anthony patted his friend on the shoulder. "Damn, I envy you so much. If you weren't my friend, I'd have taken your girl." Out of the corner of his eye, he noticed Noemi coming out of the Ice Palace. Your princess is coming. As always, accompanied by children. Tyler just smiled silently. After her lesson, Noemi was slightly tired. Nevertheless, she gave each child attention, which made the parents thrilled with their children's instructor. Sorry to make you wait, Noemi said modestly, approaching Tyler. It's all right, I didn't wait long. So, are we heading home? Tyler asked. But she didn't get a chance to answer. Suddenly, someone started shouting. Noemi! Noemi! Hearing her name, Noemi turned around. Mindy, the director's secretary, was running towards her. Noemi! We have an emergency! Mindy exclaimed as she reached the girl. What happened? Noemi asked. You need to see the director immediately. Mindy said. One of your students has lost an expensive phone in the locker room, and her father is there, furious. We need to call the police right away, Noemi said, heading toward the director's office. She was so upset by what was happening that she completely forgot about Tyler. It wasn't until he caught up with her and took her hand that Noemi focused on him. Entering the director's office, Noemi could tell from the director's expression that the situation was much more serious than she had anticipated. Here's Noemi, Mr. Coulter commented on her arrival. Will you return the phone, or should we call the police? Boomed the man sitting near the window. Beside him stood a tearful Katie, one of Noemi's students. Seeing her, Katie wanted to go to Noemi, but her father wouldn't allow it. What phone? Noemi asked, bewildered. Don't play dumb, the man roared. I trusted my daughter to you, and now. Let's keep this civil, Tyler advised. Noemi is an honest person. And who are you? The stranger demanded, still agitated. I'm Noemi's boyfriend, Tyler said, staring intently at the man. And I won't allow you to insult her without cause. Got it? Without cause, the man growled. Calm down, Mr. Coulter said in a soothing tone. Noemi, what were you doing before you met the kids downstairs and brought them to their lesson? I came to work, filled out the paperwork, and went downstairs to meet the girls, Noemi said thoughtfully. Then we went to the locker room. They changed, and we went out on the ice. Were you with the girls the whole time? The director asked. Yes, the whole time. Ask the girls. I never leave them unsupervised. They don't understand anything, the father of Katie waved his hand dismissively. That's unfair, Noemi, tired of defending herself for something she didn't do, said. I suggest we call the police and let them sort out what happened. Aren't you afraid? Katie's father asked, narrowing his eyes. No, Noemi replied firmly. As the conversation continued in the director's office, an angry janitor named Phyllis burst in, dragging a resisting Margot by the arm. Get in here, I said, Phyllis ordered in a stern tone. Phyllis, what's going on? Mr. Coulter asked, clearly surprised. Will you tell them yourself, or should I do it? She asked Margot. Margot stayed silent in response. First things first, pull out what you were trying to plant in Noemi's locker, Phyllis commanded. Sure, Margot responded calmly, taking a phone out of her pocket. That's my phone. Katie exclaimed joyfully. The director's eyes widened, he couldn't understand what was happening. Margot, explain yourself. Mr. Coulter demanded. Margot rolled her eyes and began to explain. I walked into the locker room and saw a phone under Noemi's locker, Margot replied coolly. I thought she lost it, so I was going to put it in her locker. Wait a minute, but the lockers are locked with keys, the director said, puzzled. Well, she was trying to open it with her own key, Phyllis interjected. All the locks are the same, so the keys work on all the lockers. Not all of them, Noemi said quietly. Not long ago, I had an issue with my lock, so I bought a new one. All this time, Katie's father had been watching the argument unfold, and he decided to step in. What's going on here? Katie's father asked again in a stern voice. It's all good, Mr. Coulter smiled. "We found your phone. Katie accidentally dropped it, so you're free to go." "What a mess," the man muttered. He picked up his daughter and left the office. The girl waved goodbye to Noemi, and Noemi smiled back at her student. After the door closed behind them, Mr. Coulter continued his interrogation. "All right, Margot, now that no one else is around, explain what's going on," he ordered. "Nothing, everything is fine," Margot shrugged. "I'm not joking," the director slammed his hand on the desk. "I've been hearing rumors for a while that you've been trying to undermine Noemi. She shouldn't have flirted with someone else's fiancé," Margot suddenly shouted. "That witch stole my sister's boyfriend. Even if that were true, it's none of your business." Mr. Coulter snapped. "Remember this, one more stunt like that, and you'll be fired. But I've put so much time and effort into this job." "Margot, I've said all I'm going to say," the director, red with anger, interrupted. "Besides, if it comes down to choosing between you and Noemi, I'll choose her." Margot was stunned by this statement. How could they choose this newcomer Noemi over her, a coach who had been working here for years? "Go to hell, all of you!" Margot shouted as she stormed out of the director's office, slamming the door behind her. Well, Mr. Coulter shook his head. "Noemi, I'm sorry this happened. I'll have a serious talk with her tomorrow." "It happens," Noemi waved it off. "And Phyllis, thank you so much. I won't let good people get set up," the woman smiled. "Shall we go?" Noemi looked at Tyler and smiled. When they got home, Noemi went to the kitchen to prepare dinner, and Tyler offered to help her. "Tyler, tell me, why can't Janet just let go?" Noemi asked. "She knows I'm not going back to her," he said. "Because I've met someone else." "Someone else?" Noemi was taken aback. It hurt to hear those words from Tyler. "Yes, she's amazing, beautiful, kind, and sweet. Today, I realized I love her." "I see. And who is she?" Noemi sighed sadly. "You." Noemi looked at Tyler with a doubtful expression. "If this is a joke, it's not funny," she muttered. "What makes you think I'm joking?" Tyler approached Noemi and hugged her. "I've known for a while now that I love you. Why didn't you say anything?" she asked, looking directly into his eyes. Noemi had never imagined, even in her wildest dreams, that a man like Tyler could fall in love with her. "I didn't know how to confess it," he smiled. "I wasn't sure how you'd react to my feelings. Do you want me to tell you something, too?" Noemi asked playfully. Tyler nodded. "I love you too." Tyler let out a joyful shout, pulled Noemi into a tight embrace, and spun her around the kitchen. "What's going on here?" Frederick asked as he walked into the kitchen, his brow furrowed as he looked at the two lovebirds. "Frederick, I finally got the courage to confess my love to your daughter," Tyler shouted happily. "And she loves me back." Noemi shyly lowered her eyes. "Well, that's some news," Frederick said thoughtfully. He pulled out a chair and sat down. "So, what now?" "Dad, what do you mean?" Noemi asked, feeling uneasy. She didn't like that he wasn't sharing in their happiness. Could he be against their love? "I mean that you're only 18, and you need to focus on college," Frederick replied. "And what's stopping me from doing both?" Noemi shrugged. "What if you get pregnant too early?" Frederick asked anxiously. He felt a familiar tightness in his chest but tried not to show it. "Frederick, we promise we won't have kids until Noemi finishes university," Tyler said sincerely. "Really?" Frederick looked at his daughter and stepson. "Really," Noemi confirmed. "In that case, you have my blessing." Frederick stepped forward and hugged them both. "Just a minute," Tyler said quickly, then hurried out of the kitchen. Noemi and her father exchanged surprised looks. They had no idea where Tyler was going or why. A minute later, he returned and stood in front of Noemi, dropping to one knee. "Noemi, My dearest, it feels like fate brought us together, Tyler said nervously. I cherish every moment we spend together. You are the most wonderful and amazing girl in the world. You might think I'm rushing things, but to me, it feels like I've waited far too long. He took a deep breath. Will you marry me? I don't even know, Noemi hesitated. Aren't we moving too fast? I'm not saying we have to get married tomorrow, he smiled. You are my one and only. But if you need time to think about your feelings, you have it, however long you need. Tyler, Here's what we'll do, he said, standing up. I want you to have this ring. When you've made your decision, come to me with it. If it's on your finger, I'll be the happiest man alive. But if you return it to me, then, Tyler's voice trailed off. Well, the choice is yours. I understand, Noemi smiled, taking the ring. Oh my, it's so beautiful. Just remember this, Tyler hugged her gently. I'm not rushing you, and I'll wait as long as you need. I do, Noemi said, sliding the ring onto her finger. But I have one condition. I'll agree to anything. Tyler was so moved he felt a lump form in his throat. We'll get married exactly 10 months from now, on the anniversary of my mother's passing, Noemi said, looking into Tyler's eyes. Whatever you say, sweetheart, he said, holding her tightly. All this time, Frederick stood there watching them. He was so happy. Oh, my dear children, Frederick said, wrapping his arms around the happy couple. He was overjoyed that his daughter and stepson had found love in each other. Suddenly, Tyler stumbled. He grabbed a chair to keep from falling. Tyler, what's wrong? Noemi asked, frightened. I don't know, I got dizzy, he replied weakly. Must be from all the happiness. Sit down for a bit, Frederick offered Tyler a chair. That's strange, this has never happened to me before, Tyler rubbed his temples. You should go to the hospital and get checked out, Noemi suggested, concerned. It'll pass, Tyler waved his hand dismissively. I'm probably just tired. That's right, Frederick chimed in. You've been working a lot lately. Well, we have to grow the company, Tyler defended himself. But you also need to rest. Frederick replied. All right, both of you listen to me now, Noemi said firmly. Tomorrow is Sunday, which means you both have a day off. I can't, I have things to do, Frederick quickly replied, but Tyler can rest. But Frederick. No buts. Frederick cut his off. I'm the company director, and that means I decide. Got it? Yes, Tyler smiled. So tomorrow we're going out. 3 months passed, and December came. Tyler and Noemi were living happily in his apartment. Frederick was overjoyed with their relationship. He hadn't spoken to Prue and Casey since then. Even though Prue had tried to make amends, Frederick kept rejecting her. He still felt hurt that his wife had taken their daughter's side over his. Meanwhile, Tyler began to complain more frequently about headaches, even though a hospital checkup didn't reveal anything serious. One evening, Tyler came home from work, and while Frederick was not around, he called Noemi over for a talk. Noemi, I need to talk to you seriously, Tyler said when he came home from work. About what? Noemi asked. Please take what I'm about to say seriously, he requested. And don't discuss this with anyone, not even Frederick. What happened? She asked anxiously, looking at her fiancé with concern. I made a move, and now I'm in danger, Tyler began. Seeing the fear in Noemi's eyes, he quickly reassured her, it's nothing too serious. I was just trying to take our company to the next level and almost made a not-so-legal deal. Now those people are demanding that I fulfill our agreements. But if I do, the company will go bankrupt. So I have a bit of trouble on my hands. What can I do to help you? I need to transfer ownership of this apartment to you right away. Why? Noemi asked, taken aback. So it won't be taken if anything happens, Tyler explained. But, Noemi stuttered, maybe we should report it to the police. And what would they say? He laughed. I don't know. Noemi paced the room, deep in thought. My dear girl, don't worry, Tyler approached and hugged her. Everything will be fine. Tyler transferred the apartment into Noemi's name, and at his request, she kept it a secret from everyone. New Year's came. Tyler's behavior changed significantly. He started disappearing often and coming home late at night. One day, Frederick came home from work, angry and frustrated. Noemi, where's your fiancé? He shouted from the doorway. What do you mean, where? Noemi was taken aback. He left for work this morning. Did you know he hasn't shown up at the company for 2 whole days? Frederick asked. What do you mean, 2 days? Yesterday he took a day off, and today he didn't show up at all and didn't tell anyone, Frederick said irritably. Did you try calling him? Noemi took out her phone and started dialing her fiancé's number. You think we're all so dumb there that we didn't think to do that? That's strange, Noemi muttered. His phone is out of service. Noemi spent the whole evening trying to reach Tyler, but his number remained out of network coverage. She didn't know what to do. Dad, think, maybe Tyler said something to you, Noemi pressed. He wouldn't just disappear like that. Sweetie, I really don't know anything, Frederick replied, clearly worried. Once again, he felt the pain in his chest. Not wanting to worry his daughter more, he secretly took his medication. It can't be that Tyler just vanished, Noemi cried. He's not that kind of person. Maybe you two had a fight? Frederick suggested. Meanwhile, he thought to himself, why is this pill taking so long to work? I need to be here for my daughter, not in a hospital bed. Damn, this hurts so much. No, everything was normal. Noemi tried to keep herself together, but she couldn't stop shaking, and her thoughts were a jumble, making it hard to concentrate. At that moment, the doorbell rang. Tyler! Noemi exclaimed, rushing to open the door. But her excitement quickly faded when she saw that Prue and her daughter Casey had arrived. May we come in? Prue asked quietly. Yes, of course, Noemi replied, bewildered. Who is it, dear? Frederick asked, coming out of the room. It's us, Prue smiled when she saw Frederick. She had missed him dearly. What do you want? Frederick grumbled as he slowly sat down on a stool in the hallway. Daddy, aren't you happy to see Mom and me? Casey pouted, her lips trembling. Of course, I am, Frederick said. Then why don't you come home? Casey snapped at Noemi. Or do you have another daughter now, and that means another life? No, it's just that I have a lot of work, Frederick waved his hand dismissively. He wasn't about to explain himself to his younger daughter. She'd only twist things to her advantage anyway. Why are you here? This morning, Tyler came to say goodbye, Prue said softly. Goodbye? Noemi was taken aback. She couldn't understand what was happening. What was she talking about? He said he had to leave urgently, Prue frowned. And he also said he's with someone else now, Casey added with a smirk, clearly enjoying Noemi's distress. Casey. Prue tried to hush her daughter, sensing that her words were hurting Noemi. Prue, please tell me exactly what Tyler said, Noemi pleaded. You were told clearly that he's with someone else now and that you're no longer needed here, Casey relished in causing Noemi pain, with each word feeling like a stab. Quiet. Frederick stood up abruptly, his voice loud. He couldn't stand seeing his younger daughter tormenting the older one. What did Tyler say this morning? He said he came to say goodbye, Prue replied. He said he couldn't keep deceiving Noemi. Deceiving about what? Frederick looked at his wife. He said he fell in love with someone else and is leaving the city with her. Noemi felt a wave of darkness sweep over her. How could this be? Just a month ago, Tyler had professed his love to her, made plans for the future, and now. Seeing his daughter's distress, Frederick embraced her. The medication had finally taken effect, and he could now calmly support his daughter. Noemi, let's go, he said softly, kissing her on the forehead. He guided her to the living room and helped her sit on the couch. Prue, could you please get some water? Frederick asked his wife. Why can't she get it herself? Casey asked resentfully, watching her parents fuss over Noemi. Why are you even here? Frederick was exasperated with his younger daughter's behavior. I missed you, Daddy, Casey tried to look hurt. But if you're not happy to see me. I don't see that you're eager to talk to me, Frederick said sternly. For now, all you're doing is picking on Noemi. I'm not picking on her, I'm speaking the truth, Casey sulked. She didn't like being reprimanded in front of her older sister. By the way, since Tyler has left, can I stay in this apartment for now? No. Frederick was angry. How could Casey even think about this at such a moment? Did she have no heart at all? What's the big deal? Casey shrugged. Tyler is my brother, and she, Casey nodded towards Noemi, is nobody. So she should pack up and leave this apartment. Casey. Prue finally saw her daughter's true nature. How can you be so shameless? Can't you see that she's not ashamed? Frederick answered for his daughter. She's sitting here, delighting in the suffering of her older sister. It's because of her that Tyler left the city. Casey shouted. If it weren't for her, he'd still be here in this apartment, and everything would be fine. Daddy, Tyler couldn't have just left without explaining anything to me, Noemi said quietly, her eyes red from crying. He's not that kind of person, you understand. You're right, dear, Frederick said thoughtfully. Prue, did Tyler leave anything for you? Noemi asked hopefully. What do you mean? I don't know, Noemi shrugged. A note, a letter. No, nothing, Prue patted Noemi's head. He just said he was starting a new life in another city. With another girl, Casey added with a smirk. Frederick turned to Casey and said angrily. If you don't calm down now, I'll throw you out of not just this apartment but my life as well. Daddy, Casey was taken aback. It was the first time her father had spoken to her like this. I've said all I need to, Frederick continued. You either keep quiet, or you get dressed and leave. Casey simply turned to the window in silence. Of course, she could leave. But she was too intrigued to see how things would turn out. At that moment, the doorbell rang. I'll get it, Frederick said quickly, heading to the hallway. Noemi's heart raced. Please, let it be Tyler. But her hopes were dashed when Ryan walked into the room. What's going on here? Ryan asked, surveying the room. Tyler left our Noemi and went to another city with a new girlfriend, Casey announced dramatically. Wow, Ryan whistled. Though it's not surprising, living with a girlfriend and her father for so long and not going crazy. Both of you, get up and leave the apartment. Frederick commanded. I won't let you torment Noemi. Daddy, why doesn't your precious daughter leave? Casey snapped. Frederick, fed up with everything, decided to take a desperate step. We're moving out tomorrow, he said. No, Dad, we're staying here to wait for Tyler, Noemi said firmly. Why on earth? Casey scoffed. Because Tyler transferred the apartment to me, Noemi said quietly. What? Casey's mouth dropped open in disbelief. How could this be? Noemi stood up from the couch and looked her younger sister in the eye. Just like that, she said firmly. Tyler had problems, so he had to do this. He left not because of the girl, but to prevent me from having issues. Do you really believe that, darling? Frederick asked. Yes, Dad, Noemi nodded. This means Tyler needs help. Urgently. All this time, Prue had been listening, unsure of what to do, but finally, she said. Guys, I know you don't trust me, but I'm with you, Prue said firmly. Tyler is my son, and I care about what happens to him. Great, dear, your help will be invaluable, Frederick said, embracing his wife. Now we need to figure out where to start. The whole night was spent in Noemi's apartment, fervently discussing the plan of action. Each person present offered their own ideas on where and how to search for Tyler. By morning, a clear strategy had been developed to uncover the truth about what really happened to Tyler. "Dad, are you really sure you don't know anything about the suspicious contract Tyler mentioned?" Noemi asked for the umpteenth time. "Darling, I've told you 100 times, I don't know," Frederick replied wearily. "Noemi, don't you realize that Tyler made up this whole contract story?" Prue asked. "But why would he do that?" Noemi wondered. "Don't you think my brother might have simply found another girl?" Casey interjected. She had decided to stay with Noemi to help search for Tyler. Casey was deeply fond of Tyler and worried about him. Ryan also decided to stay, thinking he might be needed for help. "What are you talking about?" Noemi asked, furrowing her brow. "Maybe he really did find someone else," Casey suggested. "And decided to buy you off, knowing you're an orphan left without an apartment. Just last night, you were insisting that Tyler had someone else," Noemi smirked. "And now you're just speculating. You're changing your tune pretty quickly." "How dare you?" Casey exclaimed. "I dare because this is my apartment," Noemi said calmly. "I can do whatever I want with it. If you don't like it, I'm not holding anyone here against their will. Once we find my brother, I won't stay here," Casey promised. "You can be sure of that." "I'll hold you to that," Noemi said with a smirk. "Prue, Dad, maybe you should rest. You both look exhausted." "No, dear, I can't rest easy knowing my child is in trouble," Prue said. After discussing all the details of the plan, they began to take action. They split up. "All right, ladies, is everything clear?" Frederick asked. The women nodded in response. "Then let's get to work. Ryan and I will head to the company office and start the search from there. Dad, if anything comes up, call us immediately," Noemi requested. Frederick and Ryan left the apartment, while the women began calling all the hotels and hostels in the city and nearby towns. After 3 hours of searching, they had no results. "Maybe Tyler really left with someone?" Casey asked cautiously. "Are you going back to that again?" Prue was irritated with her daughter. "Mom, you don't understand," Casey tried to explain. "I was just thinking, Tyler came by yesterday and said he was leaving for another city with a girl." "Mom, Noemi, what if we're wasting our time looking for a hotel room registered to Tyler?" "Daughter, you're right," Prue admitted, distressed. "If my son did leave with someone, they might have booked the room under that person's name." "Yeah, Tyler did tell us not to look for him," Casey added. "So what now?" Noemi asked, her voice breaking with despair. She started to cry again. "Hey, what's wrong?" Prue comforted her stepdaughter. "It'll be okay. We'll find Tyler soon, and he'll explain everything." "You know, I just don't understand one thing," Noemi said, wiping her tears. "Why didn't he say goodbye to me? If he has another girl, why didn't Tyler tell me that to my face?" "Well, when we find him, you can ask him that question yourself," Prue smiled. At that moment, the doorbell rang. The women exchanged glances and went to open the door. "Who is it?" Noemi asked as she opened the door. A man in a courier uniform stood there. "I need to speak with Tyler." "Does he live here?" the stranger asked. "Yes, but he's not here right now," Noemi replied quickly. "Could you give him these papers?" the courier asked, handing a large white envelope to the apartment's owner. "Yes, of course," Noemi said, taking the envelope. After signing for it, she closed the door. "What's in there?" Casey asked with curiosity. "I don't know," Noemi said, examining the envelope. "It has the logo of some medical organization. Did Tyler have health issues?" Prue asked, surprised as she watched Noemi open the envelope. "He had been suffering from headaches lately," Noemi explained. "But the tests showed it was just due to overwork." "Well, open it up," Casey urged impatiently. What's inside? Noemi reviewed the documents. I don't understand any of this, she said helplessly, looking at Prue and Casey. There are test results and MRI scans. I know what to do. I have a friend from school who's a general practitioner, Prue said decisively as she took the papers. She then took out her cell phone and began dialing. Hello, Rhonda. Hi. I need your help as a specialist. I'm going to send you some documents. Please look them over and tell me what they say. Thank you so much. I owe you one. After ending the call, Prue photographed the documents and sent them via email. Alright, now we just wait for the results, Prue said. In the meantime, let's grab a bite. Noemi sipped her coffee and stared out the window. God, please let Tyler be okay. He's only 23. There's still so much life ahead of him. Their life together. An hour later, Rhonda's reply arrived. After reading the verdict, Prue went pale. She immediately called her old classmate. Rhonda, are you sure? Prue asked. Is it really that serious? How could this happen? Where do patients with this diagnosis usually go? Did you find Tyler? Yes, dictated, I'm taking notes. Thanks. Bye. Prue turned away so the girls wouldn't see her tears. Mom, what did Rhonda say? Casey asked with worry in her voice. A brain tumor. Prue whispered. No, that must be a mistake, Noemi cried out. She was in shock. How could this be? Her Tyler is sick. Prue picked up the phone and began dialing another number. Hello, this is Tyler's mother speaking, she introduced herself. My son is with you. When can we see him? Alright, thank you. We'll be there soon. Prue looked at the girls, who were sitting silently. They already understood that Tyler's situation was very serious. Mom, what did they say? Casey asked. Tyler is in the oncology hospital in the neighboring city, Prue said quietly. She was trying to process the information she had just received. We need to go there. 2 hours later, Tyler's family arrived at the hospital. Prue and Noemi tried to hold back their tears throughout the journey. Ryan did his best to distract them with light-hearted chatter to keep their minds off the grim situation. Hello, can I help you? The security guard at the entrance asked. Yes, we're here to see our son Tyler, Frederick said. One moment, please, the guard said sternly. His expression turned serious. First, you need to meet with your relative's attending physician. We'd like to see Tyler first, and then. You don't understand, the guard interrupted Frederick. Your relative's condition is much more serious than you think. The guard checked the records again. Tyler's case had specific instructions, relatives could only visit after consulting with the attending physician. Having worked at the oncology center for years, the guard knew what this meant, a severe illness. He noted the visitors in the log and then called an escort to take them to the chief doctor's office, where they were already waiting. Hello, I'm Dr. Paul, introduced a young man in his 30s. Before you see him, we need to discuss a few things. What about? Prue asked anxiously. What do you know about inoperable brain tumors? Dr. Paul asked directly. Well, it sounds very serious, the woman mumbled. Serious is an understatement, Paul said. To put it simply, Tyler has a malignant tumor in his brain. And if it's removed? Noemi asked, her voice full of hope. Removing such a tumor doesn't guarantee a smooth operation, Paul said thoughtfully. There could be life-threatening consequences or the risk of disability. Are there no chances at all? Noemi whispered, holding back tears. What if we try anyway? The tumor is located in a place that's inaccessible for surgery, Paul tried to speak calmly, though he was trembling inside. He didn't like having these conversations with relatives, as it meant telling them their loved one wouldn't be around for long. Surgery poses a significant risk of damaging adjacent brain areas. So what do we do now? Prue whispered. Is this really it? We will treat Tyler, but the issue is that time has been lost. Metastasis has already begun, Paul explained. Prue gasped, covering her mouth to muffle her sobs. Casey hugged her mother, not fully understanding what was happening. She looked helplessly from the doctor to her mother. Was her Tyler really incurably ill? So, is treatment pointless? Frederick asked, holding his daughter's hand as she sat quietly and cried. After the tests, scans, and evaluations, we have a full picture of Tyler's condition. We've started him on radiation therapy along with chemotherapy, Paul said. Paul, just be honest with us, are there any chances? Frederick asked, looking intently at the doctor. There are always chances, but... Paul hesitated. Not in your case, he quietly murmured. You're wrong. Prue suddenly stood up from her chair. My son will recover. He's too young to leave this world. Miracles can happen. Pray, Paul advised. Maybe the Lord will hear your prayers and Tyler will overcome this terrible disease. How long does Tyler have left? Ryan asked, looking confused. The average lifespan for patients with an inoperable brain tumor at this stage is between 1 to 3 years, Paul said. When can we see Tyler? Noemi asked, thinking about how fate seemed so cruel to her. First, it took her mother away, and now it threatened her loved one. When Noemi was told her fiancé had left the city with another woman, she was willing to believe anything but this. Now, she wished for that to be the case, as long as Tyler was alive and healthy. Yesterday, when Tyler was admitted, we developed a treatment plan. We began radiation therapy today, with the first session this morning. Tyler is resting now, Paul said, looking at the family. Given that your relative's immune system is compromised and to avoid any additional illness like a cold, visits are currently prohibited. Doctor, please, let us see him, Noemi pleaded. Even if just through the glass or door. I understand. Who are you to him? Paul asked directly. His fiancée. Then the fiancée and mother will come with me now, Paul said firmly. The rest will wait outside. Thank you, Noemi whispered. Follow me, Paul said as he left the office, with Prue and Noemi following behind. The woman held her stepdaughter's hand, they both needed support. At the procedure room, Paul handed them disposable gowns, caps, masks, and shoe covers. The fewer bacteria Tyler inhales, the better, the doctor said, trying to remain emotionless. In the 2 years that Paul had worked at the oncology center, he had seen it all. He celebrated like a child when he delivered the news that a patient had beaten the terrible disease. And he wept when he could do nothing to help those who were leaving this world. Let's go, Paul said, leading them down the hospital corridor. After a few meters, he stopped in front of a door. Tyler is in this room. Please try not to cry. He needs positive emotions right now. We'll manage, Noemi promised, squeezing her stepmother's hand. Prue only nodded in response. She was ready to promise anything just to see her son. Paul nodded back and opened the door to the room. Well, how are we doing today, patients? Paul asked as he entered the room. Noemi and Prue followed him inside. The girl immediately saw her beloved Tyler, who was lying by the window. He looked pale. Tyler, Noemi tried to hold back her emotions, but she couldn't, she began to cry. She sat down on the edge of his bed and took his hand. How are you, my dear? My girl, what are you doing here? Tyler asked quietly. Then he noticed Prue, who stood nervously fiddling with her handkerchief. Mom, you're here too. Son, we're all here, Prue tried to calm herself, but tears choked her. Her eldest son. How could she accept this terrible truth that there was nothing they could do to help him? Frederick, Casey, and Ryan. Wow, Tyler said. And my sister isn't angry at my Noemi anymore. No, the woman shook her head. I'll have to see that, Tyler smiled. You'll see it when you get better, Noemi stroked his hand. God, it's so cold. I've let you down, sweetheart, Tyler whispered. I never got to see you in a white wedding dress. Don't say that. Noemi exclaimed. We still have a whole life ahead of us. We'll definitely exchange rings. I wish it were that simple, Tyler said with a bitter smile. But. By the way, how did you find me? I thought I had come up with a brilliant idea that I had another woman and left with her. Son, we know how much you love Noemi, Prue smiled. You understand each other with just a glance, with half a word. With that kind of love, there is and will never be a third wheel. Why did you lie to us about having someone else? Noemi asked, wiping her tears. The thing is, I love you so much, Tyler looked at his fiancée with loving eyes. And I love you very, very much, she took his hand and kissed it. That's why I did it, he tried to explain. I'd rather you hated me than lived in the past. Gradually, you'd fall out of love with me and forget. Don't say that. Noemi looked at Tyler. Remember, we're in this together. We'll endure everything. We'll overcome it all. Okay, ladies, it's time to say goodbye, Paul said, who had been standing silently and watching the scene unfold. Tyler, I'll come to see you tomorrow, Noemi promised. Sorry, but that won't be possible, the doctor said firmly. You'll be able to visit Tyler 2 weeks after the chemotherapy course. But. No buts. Paul said sternly. When they got home, Noemi went to her room. She started packing her things. She had made up her mind to go to the hospital, despite Paul's ban, to take care of her beloved. Noemi, reconsider, Frederick said, entering the room after his daughter. You have exams coming up. Dad, I won't leave Tyler, Noemi replied. Tomorrow morning, I'll go to college and apply for a leave of absence. Do you think I can sit in lectures and listen to what the professors say, knowing that Tyler is alone in the hospital? And what about the kids at the ice center? Frederick asked hopefully. He knew how important her students were to her. I don't know. The girl hesitated. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked at her father. He approached her, sat beside her, and hugged her. Sweetheart, I don't even know what to say, Frederick said. He gazed out the window, reflecting on how unfair fate could be. His thoughts were interrupted by a knock at the door. Frederick went out to meet the guest. A minute later, he returned with Prue. I couldn't stay home, Prue admitted. Casey and I came. If you don't mind, can we stay here for a while? Yes, of course, come in, Noemi forced a smile. Looking at her stepmother, she asked in surprise, where's Casey? She's waiting in the hallway, Prue explained. She thinks you might kick her out. Why would she think that? Casey. Noemi called out loudly. Come in. Casey slowly entered the room and quietly stood in the corner, her head bowed. Noemi, Casey, now is not the time for arguments, Noemi cut her off sharply. We'll have time for that later. For now, make yourself comfortable, she said, nodding toward an empty chair by the window. Noemi stood up and continued to pack her things. Prue and Frederick exchanged glances. Noemi, your father and I have been thinking. Prue began slowly. The girl stopped and looked at her stepmother. You shouldn't leave your children, Prue raised her right hand to forestall any objections from her stepdaughter. They have come to love you sincerely and won't understand if you abandon them. Plus, you have exams coming up. I've already told Dad that I'll take a leave of absence, Noemi said wearily. Why? The woman looked at Noemi. I'm not working and staying at home. We can take turns caring for Tyler, me during the day and you in the evening. I want to do it myself. Don't you trust me? Prue asked, hurt. And if you've forgotten, I'm Tyler's mother, too, and I have a right to him as well. I'm not disputing that, Noemi said, approaching Prue and taking her hands. I want to be with him every minute, every second. I want that too. Tears streamed from Prue's eyes. She recalled the doctor's words about Tyler having no chance. Noemi, Prue sighed heavily. Tyler was always a quiet and calm boy. He never caused any trouble. I didn't give him the attention he deserved because of that. Now I realize that I deprived him of a mother's love. I want, if not to make up for it, at least to surround him with care in his final days. Don't say that. Noemi shouted. Tyler will get better. He will. My girl, I want that more than anything, Prue said, moving closer to her stepdaughter and hugging her. We'll fight this together. I can't be without him. 5 days later, Tyler was sent home for the weekend. From a cheerful and energetic optimist, he had turned into a closed and silent person. All right, Paul said as he walked out to see his patient off. I expect you back on Sunday evening. Doctor, how long will the treatment last? Noemi asked, her eyes fixed on her beloved, who was sitting in the car and staring glumly out the window. Another 7 weeks, Paul replied quietly. He didn't know how to tell her that Tyler had started experiencing irreversible changes. His hearing and vision had deteriorated. Paul, Tyler has been undergoing treatment for a week. Noemi looked at the doctor. Has the tumor started to shrink? It's too early to say, the doctor evaded the question. In reality, he knew very well that the tumor had not only stopped shrinking but had continued to grow. I see, the girl sighed sadly. Well, we're leaving. We'll be back on Sunday evening. Goodbye. Goodbye. All the way home, Noemi chatted cheerfully, updating Tyler on the latest news. While he had previously listened with interest, now her chatter irritated him. His head also ached terribly. And do you remember Lily, who could never quite manage a somersault? Noemi said, oblivious to her fiancé's sullen mood. Well, she finally managed it yesterday. Enough. Tyler raised his voice. Can you be quiet for even 5 minutes? But you always liked my stories about my students. Noemi said, taken aback. Not today. Tyler said. I want silence. Frederick just shook his head silently. Yes, Tyler had become a different person. The illness had changed him drastically. Noemi fell silent. She was lost, unsure of how to handle the situation. At that moment, Tyler tried not to look at his beloved. He wanted so much to hold her and ask for forgiveness. In the hospital, he had come up with a new tactic for dealing with Noemi. Tyler would provoke and hurt her so that she would spend less time with him and distance herself. He wanted her to suffer less after he was gone. Once home, Tyler immediately went to his room without even glancing at the relatives who had come to greet him. What's wrong with him? Casey asked in surprise. She had never seen her brother in such a state. He's just tired, Noemi tried to explain. He'll rest a bit and will be his old self again. I really hope so, Casey said. Prue decided to talk to her son. She knocked on his door and entered. Tyler, how are you? She asked quietly, sitting on the edge of the bed. She reached out and stroked his head. Mom, what are you doing? He said irritably. What do you mean? Prue said, flustered. I came to talk to you. Mom, don't be silly, Tyler snorted. There are plenty of people in the house who are far more interesting than me. But I haven't seen you in a long time and I want to know how you're doing. The woman whispered. Fine, Mom, Tyler replied irritably. Now can I be alone? Yes. The woman left the room, completely bewildered and not understanding what was happening. Seeing his confused wife, Frederick slammed his hand on the table. No, my dear ones, this won't do, the man said, striding quickly to Tyler's room. Tyler, can you explain what's going on with you? If you exclude the inoperable tumor in my head, nothing, Tyler replied with a biting tone. And you decided to punish us all for this? Frederick erupted. What do you want from me? Tyler snapped, sitting up in bed. His head spun, and he lay back down. Son, do you need help? Yes, have me operated on and get this crap out of me. If not, leave me alone. Tyler, listen to me, Frederick said quietly. He didn't want the others to hear their conversation. I know you're being deliberately rude and harsh with us. But I don't understand why. Frederick, understand, Tyler said, his voice pleading. I won't be around much longer, and I don't want the people I love to suffer. And so you're doing everything to make us, let's say, hate you, the man guessed. To some extent, Tyler admitted. So that it doesn't hurt you so much. Tyler, it's going to hurt us anyway, Frederick patted him on the back. But in this case, it will be doubly painful. Because, instead of living in love, harmony, and understanding these past few months, you've been pushing us away. I don't want Noemi to suffer. She's a strong girl, Frederick said softly. In time, she'll cope with this pain. Don't push us out of your life. Give us the chance to be with you and hold your hand, please. Leave us with happy and bright memories of you. You're right. July 1st arrived. Throughout this time, Tyler had been undergoing treatment with the support of his family. Prue, Casey, and Noemi had been taking care of him. On this day, Noemi felt awful. She was constantly distracted and couldn't focus on her work. Suddenly, she heard a cry. Shaking off her thoughts, Noemi turned toward the source of the sound. It was little Lily, who had fallen and hurt her knee badly. Noemi, it hurts, the girl cried. Noemi approached the child and started examining her. At that moment, the phone rang. Looking at the display, Noemi was taken aback. Her heart raced. Yes, Paul, I'm listening, Noemi said quietly. Noemi, I have bad news for you. Tyler has just passed away, 10 minutes ago. The world darkened in Noemi's eyes. How could this be? Just this morning, they had been talking on the phone with Tyler, laughing and discussing weekend plans. Yes, he had been declining recently, but Noemi hadn't paid much attention, attributing his condition to the effects of radiation therapy. Noemi, are you okay? Lily patted the teacher on the shoulder. The girl was scared by Noemi's state, forgetting about her own sore knee. Noemi, can I help? Noemi heard through the fog in her head. Looking up, she saw a man with concern in his eyes, studying her. His face seemed vaguely familiar, but Noemi couldn't place where she had seen him before. But, in any case, it didn't matter now. What? Noemi asked, bewildered. She didn't understand what was happening. Lily had fallen on the ice and hurt her knee, the doctor had called to say. Noemi's eyes widened. She finally grasped the meaning of Paul's words. I asked if everything was okay, the man started to say, but he saw tears streaming from Noemi's eyes. What happened? He's gone, Noemi choked on her tears, whispering. Who? The man asked, stunned. My fiancé. Noemi, don't be so upset, the stranger said, trying to comfort her. You're a very beautiful girl, and your fiancé will come back when he realizes the mistake he made by leaving you. How do I go on? Noemi cried. She was lost in her grief and didn't hear the man's words at all. At that moment, Mr. Coulter, the director of the Ice Palace, came out onto the ice. What happened? He asked, kneeling in front of the girl. Noemi, seeing the director, buried her face in his shoulder, crying even more. This is it. Mr. Coulter immediately understood the reason for her tears. After all, every employee at the Ice Palace was aware of Tyler's battle with cancer. Yes, Noemi sobbed. Mr. Coulter, I understand that you have good relations with your employees. But that doesn't mean you should let them skip lessons, Katie's father said haughtily. Their personal lives should remain personal. We're not paying for your teachers to miss lessons. So what if her fiancé left her? Noemi's fiancé has been fighting a brain tumor for almost a year, the director whispered. Today he lost that battle. The man flushed. He was ashamed of his behavior. I'm sorry, Katie's father said. Please accept my condolences. 9 days passed. Noemi threw herself into her work with her students, exhausting herself to the point that she only came home to sleep. Frederick didn't want to leave his daughter alone and decided to stay with her for now. Prue and Casey had temporarily moved in with them. The sisters gradually found common ground, bonding over their shared grief. Noemi, come to dinner, Prue called from the kitchen when the girl returned home from work. Thanks, but I'm not hungry, Noemi replied. She headed to her room and lay down on the bed, wanting to be alone for a while. But Casey wouldn't let her have that. She barged into the room and sat in the chair. Noemi, when was the last time you looked in the mirror? Casey asked. What's wrong? Noemi responded. You've lost so much weight, Casey said. Remember what you promised Tyler? What? That you wouldn't mourn him too much. Casey, I can't, tears involuntarily rolled down Noemi's cheeks. I miss him so much. Noemi, we all miss him, Casey hugged her sister. Tyler was a unique person. Everyone who knew him loved him. But for his sake, for his memory, we have to hold on. How? Noemi cried. How can I do that? I can't live without him. I miss him. I miss him too, Casey said, fighting back her own tears. His laughter, his voice. But we need to be strong. Remember when Tyler decided he'd be better off alone and started tormenting us? And Dad talked to him, explained he was wrong, and he changed. You need to do the same now. I'll try, Noemi sniffled. That night, Noemi couldn't sleep, tossing and turning in bed. Casey was snoring softly beside her. Noemi turned on her phone and started looking through photos. She remembered how in love she and Tyler had been with each other and with life, and how fate had been so unfair. Just when Noemi had become happy, fate took away her beloved. Tears streamed down her face. Without noticing them, Noemi continued to look at the photos. Unconsciously, she fell asleep. That night, for the first time since Tyler's passing, she dreamt of him. He stood in the middle of the room, drenched from head to toe, shivering from the cold. Tyler. My love. Noemi screamed. She rushed to him, wanting to hug and warm him, but he wouldn't let her. Tyler raised his hands in front of her, as if to block her. Noemi, you know you can't do that, he stopped her. Why are you all wet? Noemi asked, stunned, examining him. It's your fault, Tyler looked at her reproachfully. Me? The girl was confused. You drowned me in your tears, he shook his head. I can't dry off. I'm cold and can't warm up. I won't cry anymore. But how am I supposed to live without you? My love, everything will be okay, Tyler promised. I've taken care of it. In the morning, everyone was awakened by the smell of freshly brewed coffee and baked pancakes. When they entered the kitchen, they were surprised to see Noemi bustling around the stove. Oh, sleepyheads, you're up already. Noemi smiled at her relatives. Yes, Frederick approached his daughter and kissed her. Sister, are you okay? Casey asked, eyeing Noemi with concern. Yes, I'm fine, Noemi smiled in response. And I'm not going crazy, don't worry. I just had a dream about Tyler. And? He said everything will be okay. I see, Casey shrugged. Although she didn't quite understand what had happened, she was glad to see Noemi smiling rather than crying again. As Christmas approached, Noemi immersed herself in holiday preparations. After that dream, she no longer mourned her beloved. Yes, she remembered him, but she no longer cried. Frederick and Prue had moved back to their home. Casey, with Noemi's permission, stayed with her sister. It's more fun with two, the sisters decided. Once again, after coming home from work, Noemi was exhausted. Balancing studying during the day and working in the evening proved to be very difficult. She sat down on a poof in the hallway to catch her breath. "Noemi, why are you sitting here?" Casey came rushing out of the room. Her eyes sparkled mischievously. "I'm tired." "Get up and go to your room," the younger sister said impatiently. "We have guests." "Who?" Noemi frowned. "You'll find out soon." When Noemi entered the room, she saw Paul. Since the last time she had seen him, he had lost a significant amount of weight. "Hello, Noemi," the guest said, standing up from the sofa to greet her. "Hello," Noemi responded, looking at the doctor with confusion. "Well," Paul hesitated. "I have a message for you." He handed her a white envelope. "It's a letter from Tyler. He gave it to me a day before he left and asked me to give it to you before Christmas." "Thank you," Noemi said, carefully taking the letter. "If you don't mind, I'd like to read it alone." Without waiting for a response, she went to her room. There, she carefully opened the envelope and took out the letter. Noemi hesitated for a long time before finally gathering herself and began to read. "Hello, my dear. This is my last message to you. Fate has decreed that I leave this world young. It must be this way. But I want you not to bury yourself with me. You are a young and beautiful woman. You should be happy, as a successful coach, as a beloved wife and mother. Promise me that you will become that. You will meet a man who will love you and whom you will love in return. And I will watch over you from above, admiring and being proud of you for being strong and brave. I will be your guardian angel. I'm letting you go." Noemi put the letter aside. It had been 5 months since her beloved had passed. Tyler was right, she needed to slowly start moving out of her pain, but how? At that moment, there was a knock on the door. "Yes?" Noemi said. Paul quietly entered the room. "Is everything okay?" he asked. "Yes, it's the letter from Tyler." "I know," he said, sitting down in a chair. "How are you?" "It feels like I'm just now waking up from a long sleep," the girl admitted. With the support of her loved ones, Noemi began to emerge from her shell of pain and grief. Surprisingly, Casey played a significant role in this. She constantly distracted her sister from sad thoughts. Noemi was grateful to Casey for that. December 24th arrived. As they decorated the Christmas tree, the sisters argued over which color ornaments would look best. "Noemi, look how perfect the red ornaments will look on the tree," Casey argued. "Much better than your silver ones." "You don't understand anything," Noemi countered. In truth, she didn't care much about the color of the ornaments. "Silver is the new trend for next year." "What?" Casey was taken aback. "Since when did you start following fashion?" "Since you came into my life," Noemi smiled. "I don't get it," Casey squinted. "Are you planning to get revenge for me teasing you by calling you a country bumpkin?" "Well, not exactly revenge," Noemi shrugged. "Just a little bit of teasing." "Oh, is that so?" Casey feigned anger. She grabbed some tinsel and swung it at her older sister. "Then I challenge you to a duel." With great pleasure, the older sister laughed and threw some artificial snow at Casey, covering her in a white, web-like blanket. "So that's how it is," Casey pouted and sat down on the couch. "I come to you with all my heart, and you." "Little sister, what's wrong?" Noemi asked with concern. She sat down beside Casey and hugged her. "I was just kidding. I'm sorry if I hurt you." "You're caught," Casey shouted happily and started covering her older sister with shiny tinsel. "Just wait, you little rascal," Noemi said, removing the tinsel from herself. "I'll get you now." "Girls, what's going on here?" Frederick entered the room. He looked bewildered at the mess his daughters had created. Smiling, Prue followed him. "Daddy, save me from this wicked witch you call your daughter," Casey shouted and ran behind Frederick. Then she peeked out from behind his shoulder and stuck out her tongue at her sister. "Now you can't get me." "Oh, come here," Noemi said playfully. "I'm going to spank you," she said, grabbing some tinsel. "Ha!" Casey snorted. "You wish, Dot." "So, girls, what's the point of the argument?" Prue asked, laughing. "Mom, which ornaments would you put on the tree, red or silver?" Casey asked, coming out from her hiding place. "I would put both red and silver," the woman said, taking her daughter's hand. "You girls are doing a great job getting ready for Christmas." "My dear relatives, I wanted to talk to you about something," Noemi said, sitting in a chair and looking at her family. "Maybe we could all celebrate Christmas together. Are we not going to be in the way?" Frederick asked. "Daddy, Mommy, we would be very happy to have you here," Casey looked at her parents. "Well, if we're not in the way," Prue glanced at her husband. "No, on the contrary, we would be very happy," Noemi smiled. She wanted to spend this Christmas with her loved ones. No one knows what life will bring them next year. The girl had learned a firm lesson: to live here and now. It might turn out that they would never all be together again to celebrate Christmas. The next day, Noemi decided to take a walk through the winter streets. She strolled along, observing people hurrying by. Despite their rush, they smiled at everyone they passed. The air was filled with the scent of celebration and wonder. "Noemi, hello." Turning around, she saw Paul. "Hi," Noemi replied cheerfully. "What are you doing here?" "After Christmas, they're opening the regional hospice here, and I've been invited to work there," he said. "Haven't you heard about it?" "You know, I try not to follow such news," Noemi admitted. "I see," Paul said, pressing his lips together. He felt uncomfortable bringing up her loss again. "How are your parents?" "Your sister?" "They're doing great," Noemi smiled in response. "We're preparing for Christmas." "That's good," Paul sighed sadly. "Say hello to them for me." "And where will you be this evening?" Noemi asked unexpectedly. She was surprised by her own curiosity. "At home, alone," Paul said, trying to sound upbeat, but he felt terribly lonely in the city. He had only moved there a week ago and hadn't had a chance to make new friends yet. "Listen, why don't you come over to our place?" the girl suggested. "Well, that seems awkward." "Stop it," Noemi waved her hand. "We're expecting you by 5 in the evening." "I'll be there," Paul promised. "Definitely." Noemi didn't tell anyone that Paul would be joining them, wanting to keep it a surprise. And she succeeded. Everyone welcomed him warmly. "Wow, what a surprise," Frederick said, hugging Paul. "I'm so glad I won't be the only man among these wonderful women." "Thank your daughter for the invitation," Paul smiled at Noemi. At that moment, Casey nudged her older sister under the table. She had long told Noemi that Paul liked her, but Noemi had always brushed off her younger sister's comments. The dinner table was full of lively merriment. Everyone was laughing and enjoying themselves. During the meal, Frederick decided to make a toast. "My dear ones, I want to make a toast. I'll be speaking for a while, so get ready. Over the past 2 years, our lives have been turned upside down. I gained a daughter and lost a son. For all of us, this has been an irreplaceable loss. During this difficult time, our family has come together, and bitter enemies have become the best sisters in the world," he said, looking at Noemi and Casey. "My girls, I'm very happy that you've become friends and found common ground. Casey, you've shown me a completely different side of yourself. It seemed like you went from being selfish to becoming a compassionate, responsive, and lovely person." "Thank you," Casey said, touched by her father's words. "Noemi. My poor girl," Frederick sighed sadly. "You've faced so much suffering." "Dad, that's all in the past," Noemi smiled. "Now, only the best awaits me in life." "I hope so," Frederick said, glancing at Paul, who couldn't take his eyes off Noemi. He liked the young man and hoped that one day Paul's feelings for Noemi would be mutual. Everyone clinked their glasses and cheered joyfully. At that moment, Noemi leaned back in her chair, resting her hand on Paul's. He quickly moved his hand away. The girl looked at Paul, smiled, and took his hand in hers. Their eyes met. Prue watched them discreetly. She crossed her fingers for good luck. God willing, this time this girl will be lucky, she thought. She's been through so much and now deserves happiness. At that moment, the angel ornament hanging on the tree gently swayed, as if to assure Prue that it would watch over her. From now on, only happiness and love awaited